So the Mongols came over, ready for war, and died in a tornado. But they tried again, and had a nice time fighting with the Japanese, but then died in a tornado.
Have you ever wondered, how do we know if the Mongols died in a tornado? Like, who were the main people at the time, who told us what happened, and what do they say? Well, as a history enthusiast, I went looking. And what I've found, and will be sharing here, is not to prove if the magnificent Mr Wurtz is wrong or right, but to share a summary of our surviving accounts, because I'm curious to know what you guys think happened to our most unfortunate of invaders. Okay, so for one, we don't really know exactly how the first invasion played out. The version of events that is not under contention by the historians I've read is that the invaders landed at Hakata Bay, did what invaders tended to do, retreated back to their ships, and set back out for home. And everything else is where our contemporary accounts differ. We have only 3 sources that mention any sort of meteorological phenomenon. For instance, on the defending side, we have Kadenokōji Nakatsu. We know that he was a minor courtier, and that he had composed a brief diary entry only a few weeks after the invasion. And what Kadenoko writes is how only a few of the enemy boats reached Hakata Bay, as the rest of the incoming fleet was blown back home by what he calls a reverse easterly wind. Alright, now compare Kadenoko with another of our sources, the Yuan Shi, meaning the official history of the Yuan dynasty, a dynasty that was largely Mongolian speaking. In the Yuan Shi, there's no mention of any issues facing the invaders crossing the high seas. Instead, the invaders are described as landing, and towards the end of their skirmish, running into some sort of trouble. Apparently their arrows run out, they encounter issues with supplies, and the Yuan Shi even includes a supposed crucial decision made by the invading commanders to perform a strategic retreat. And if you're curious, here's my super high quality reenactment of this decision. They say if one puts up a strong fight with a small force, one ends in being captured by the large force. To drive on fatigued troops into the enemy ground is not safe tactics. It is better to draw back our forces. Commander? Yes? They also say, if someone states the obvious is no. Okay, maybe that last part wasn't true, but after the invaders retreated back to their boats, this is what the Yuan Shi explains to have happened. That night, there's a great storm, and our fighting craft were dashed against the rocks and destroyed in great numbers. We should keep in mind, however, that everything that was written in the Yuan Shi was written almost a century after the first invasion, and that the compilers of this so-called official history of the Yuan were not actually of the Yuan dynasty themselves, despite the name. You see, the compilers of this history were of the Ming dynasty, the successors of the Yuan. In other words, they did not even speak Mongolian. Then comes our last source that mentions any sort of meteorological phenomenon, but it's actually quite mysterious, but maybe I've just missed something. This is the so-called Korean source, and it tells us of how a natural disaster drowned 13,500 invaders. We shouldn't trust the statistics figure though, as chronicles during these times were notoriously inaccurate. And why I said the Korean source was mysterious is because the 4 modern historians I've read that mention it, unfortunately, they didn't give any more background info that I could share with you guys. They even vaguely referred to it as a contemporary record, or as official record, suddenly now it's plural, or even simply as a surviving record. We should also talk about our other surviving sources that don't mention any natural disaster, despite it being very odd that they didn't. We've got the Japanese Hachiman gudōkun, a text likely written only a generation after the invasions, and where one modern historian, Thomas Conlan, would even describe the Hachiman gudōkun as being devoted to finding any miracle at every possible opportunity, as its sole purpose was to show how divinely powerful Hachiman was, who was basically like a god of warriors. But more accurately, Hachiman was what was called a kami. And kami were, well, both singular and plural deities or spirits that had nature magic. Yet, despite the invaders even torching a shrine that belongs to Hachiman, our holy text stays quiet. Similarly does another source by a samurai, Takezaki Suenago, who is actually a defender in both of the invasions. This text is the lavishly decorated scrolls of the Mongol invasions of Japan, and oddly too adds no meddling of the gods, despite being a text showered with prayers and gratitudes to various kami. The scroll's purpose was to obtain rewards for the samurai Takezaki's martial deeds, because if we were to believe everything that was written in the scrolls, Takezaki had performed all of his great acts of heroism before the invaders fled back to their boats, therefore before any kind of storm may have come, and well, stolen all the credit. And finally, our last source is the Japanese chronicle Nihon Ōdai Ichiran, which only claims that the Mongols went through all their arrows and fled back home. So what do you think? Was there a storm? Was there not a storm? I think Kadenoko is our most reliable source, and he believes some sort of natural disaster occurred, but we have the Yuan Shi and the Korean source to testify its consequences. My theory is that the defending side did not realize how devastating it was for the invaders. Maybe that explains the silence of our other, mostly Japanese-speaking sources. But post your crazy theories down below and check out the description for more readings.